Welcome back. Now we're adding to some values and we have placeholder functions for others. We actually are adding to the player level. We're just not adding to attribute points and spell points. We can see that in Aura Character, where we implemented these interface functions. Add to player level actually calls add to level on the player state. Attribute points and spell points have to-dos. Now in the player state, since we have this level variable and it's replicated with a rep notify, we know that when we set this on the server, it will be replicated. And if we take a look at the CPP file, when we add to the level, we're broadcasting a delegate. We're broadcasting the level with on-level change delegate. And in the rep notify, we're broadcasting it there as well. And this delegate is designed for our widget controller to respond to it. So if we go to UI, widget controller, and overlay widget controller, I'm going to go in the private folder actually, we can see where we're binding to our delegates. And so far, we're only binding to on XP changed. We're not binding to on level changed yet. So that's something that we'll have to take care of. Now, what do we want to do when our level changes? Well, I'd simply like to pass that on up to a widget. Now, we haven't created that widget yet, but we'd like to pass that on up by broadcasting a value. Now, overlay widget controller has a number of delegates for broadcasting things. One is for when an attribute changes. We're reusing that for our XP bar. We have on XP percent change delegate. Now, I'd like a delegate to broadcast when our level changes as well. In fact, we'd like a delegate to broadcast when any integer value changes. That's our level, our attribute points, our spell points, and so on. Now, we could just keep reusing F on attribute changed signature, but really these are not attributes. Even our XP percent is not an attribute. Now, I'm okay with just reusing this delegate for on XP percent change because the percent for the XP is a float. It's a ratio. But for attribute points, spell points, and level, I'd like to broadcast an integer. And I'd like a delegate designed to broadcast that. So I'm going to declare a dynamic multicast delegate 1 param, but this one is going to be for player stats rather than attributes. So I'm going to call this F on player stat changed signature, and this is going to use an int32 instead of a float. And we'll make an on player stat changed delegate. So we'll use on player stat change signature, and this one will be for player level. So we'll say on player level changed delegate. We can give it blueprint assignable, category gas, and instead of XP, we'll say level. And we'll broadcast this in response to the player level changing. So in bind callbacks to dependencies, we can bind, and really I can just create a lambda for this. So I can take my Aura player state, access on level change delegate, and call add lambda. So for add lambda, I'm going to give myself some room here. And as I always do when I make a lambda, I make the square brackets, the parentheses, and the function body, and then give the function body its own room. And all I want to do is broadcast my new on player level changed delegate. So I'm going to broadcast that here. Now we need to broadcast a value, right? An on level change delegate on the player state. If we look at that, it's an on player stat changed. And if we look at that delegate, it broadcasts an int32. So to bind to this, we need a callback that takes an int32. So our lambda should take an int32 called new level. And of course, we're using on player level change delegate, which means we must capture this, and we're going to broadcast new level. And now we can receive that in any of our widgets. So the last step is to create a widget that can receive this delegate broadcast. And we're going to do that now. I'm going to go ahead and run in debug mode. So we need a widget to show our level. Now, if we go into Blueprints, UI, Spell Globes, the Spell Globe would be kind of nice. It'd be great if we had something like this that just shows our player level. But the spell globe is kind of specific to spells. It receives ability info with this delegate. So it kind of has all this other stuff that we don't need. It waits for cooldown changes. It's kind of overkill. But other than that, it's almost exactly what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Now, I could go and make a parent widget blueprint that contains, say, the ring and the glass, and then reparent spell globe. I'm not going to bother with any of that. This is just going to be a separate blueprint. So I'm going to duplicate it and call this one WBP underscore value globe, because I'd like this to just have a value. So I'm going to close spell globe and open value globe. And this is going to be the same, only it's going to have a lot less stuff in it. It's going to use the overlay widget controller, yes. So we do want that part. But instead of binding to the ability info delegate, we're not going to do that at all. So I'm going to remove that whole part there. Instead, we're going to bind to a different delegate. We're going to bind to on-player level change delegate. And we'll do that soon, but first let's clean up this widget and take everything out that we don't need. Now, for one, we don't need a spell icon, so I'm going to delete that. I do want the glass, I do want the ring, and I do want the text for the cooldown. In fact, I want my text to have its render opacity set to 1, so I can see it. So I'm going to set that to 1, and I'm going to go into the graph and make sure we're not hiding that cooldown text. I'm going to delete the call to that. We're also calling clear globe, which is setting the image spell icon, a variable that no longer exists, and setting the image background to the transparent brush. We don't even need to call clear globe, do we? We also don't need to update the spell icon brush because we don't have a spell icon anymore. So I'm going to delete that. In fact, I'll delete that whole function, update spell icon brush. We can keep update globe padding, although I should check to make sure we're not using something that doesn't exist anymore. That's that spell icon. We can remove that. But we're setting the glass and the image background padding, so we can keep that. We're updating the ring brush. That looks good. And we're updating the box size. We want to keep that as well. So we're keeping everything else. Now, over here in our functions, let's see if there's anything we don't need. We do need update box size, ring brush, globe padding. Set background tint could be useful, as we may choose to give this a background and set it to a dark tint. Clear globe is just setting the background to a clear, transparent brush. I don't really see a need to delete that. We have set icon in background, which sets the brush for the icon. We really don't care about that. And we can set the image background if we want to. So I'm going to remove these for the image spell icon. And we'll just call set brush here. We don't need icon brush. No worries, we won't use that. We don't need receive ability info. That's a function that we're not going to use. And it also uses an input tag and a cooldown tag, things we don't need. So I'm going to delete input tag. Yes, I know it's in use. I do really want to delete it. I'm going to check don't show this again and click yes. I'm going to delete cooldown tag, time remaining, cooldown int, timer frequency, cooldown timer handle, wait cooldown change, and I can delete receive ability info. We can just delete that whole function. And I'm going to go back and rename the text from text cooldown to text value. All right, so we're gutting out this whole thing almost, and we can set the default value for this text to 1 and see what it looks like with that value. And in fact, I'm going to make its size bigger. We'll try 36. We'll see a 2-digit value in here too and make sure that's not too big. That looks good. And I'd like my background to have an image, and we're updating our background. We're actually not anymore, but we have a function called set icon and background. I'm actually going to change this to simply update background and remove the icon brush as an input. And now we just have something that sets the background brush, and we'll call that an event construct as well. So we'll have update background here. And this actually should just use a variable in our globe properties for the background. We don't need spell icon brush anymore, but we can rename this spell icon brush variable to background brush. And we can use that, but no need for this to actually be an input parameter. We can just use background brush directly in this and remove that input parameter as well. Okay, and now we're updating the background. So if we change the background brush, then we should see it in our designer tab. Now, if I type globe and I select flowing globe, for example, we'll see that here, but I'd rather use something a little bit less colorful, like MI locked BG. I'm going to set that. So for background brush, I'm going to select it and set it to MI locked BG. And now we see what it looks like. But I'd also like this to be a little bit darker too. So I'm going to set the tint, and that's why I kept that function, set background tint. I'm going to set that here in event pre-construct and just set it to 0.1 and see what that looks like. Compiling. That looks pretty cool. Alternatively, I may want it a little bit darker. 0.01. Let's see what that looks like. Almost black. So we can play with the tint here. But alternatively, we can also change this MI locked BG. Now, MI locked BG is made for a specific purpose. It's going to be used for locked spells in our spell menu once we create that. So I can just duplicate this and call this one MI level BG. And we'll use this one instead if we want to change it. So changing this to MI level BG, now I can change level BG without changing the other one, locked BG. So I'm not going to set the background tint. Instead, I'm going to play around with the material instance, and I need to make sure my background brush is set to the correct one, not MI locked BG, but MI level BG. So compiling, making sure the image background has MI level BG. Now I can mess with MI level BG. Now we have a cloud darkness. We can adjust that. If we make it lower, then the clouds get brighter. If we make it higher, then we get sort of a little bit more washed out. We also have a negative color that we can darken a bit. And of course, our color is white, but we can make the color itself darker. So we can play with these parameters a bit until we have something that's looking a little bit darker. We also have a perimeter shadow. We can make that darker as well. And then our speed, the speed at which these noise textures are panning, we can lower that to make it look a little bit less turbulent. And when we play with the darkness and make it contrasted more, sometimes it looks better with a lower speed. So negative color is pretty dark. Color itself is going to be pretty dark. And my perimeter shadow is pretty high. So I'm going to save that and see what it looks like here. And I think that's looking pretty good. So tweak that to your heart's content. I might actually raise the color and up that perimeter shadow even more. I think I like how this looks. And you don't have to make that color completely desaturated either. You know, it could be red, although red kind of looks like our health globe. It could be purple, could be a color that you haven't used. Green kind of looks good. Maybe we'll experiment as we go. But now we have something that can represent our level. I'm going to make this a darker green, actually. But anyways, enough tweaking for now. We have something that can represent our level. It looks cool. We need it to respond to the delegate we created and our broadcasting. It's called on player level change delegate. We're going to subscribe to that delegate. So let's get our BP overlay widget controller, type in on player level changed delegate, hook that up to our sequence, and take our new value, and we're going to set our text value here. So taking text value, calling set text, that function. And for our level, we can take new value, plug it in. We're converting from text to integer. Compile that and save, and we have a widget. Now we just need to add this to our overlay. So we can go to Content Blueprints, UI, Overlay, WBP Overlay, and we can drag one of these in somewhere. So I'm going to search for WBP Value Globe. We'll drag one in. We're going to rename this to Value Globe underscore level. And we'll just have it up here for now. And we need to set its widget controller. So we'll do that right after setting our other widget controllers here. So let's get our value globe. I did not check is variable. So now after doing that, we can bring it in. We can call set widget controller. And we can pass in our widget controller so that its widget controller will be set. And compiling and saving, we'll save all, press play, and we see our level there. Now, we need to test out when our level changes, of course, because right now we're just seeing its default value. And we could easily make ourselves level up quite quickly by changing the amount of experience that one of our level 1 warriors gives us. So we can go into Ability System Data and go to XP Reward, Warrior, and choose level 1, that key, and change this to a higher value, like 150. Now we only have to kill 2 of these things to level up. So let's see what happens if we do. Pressing play, we'll kill 1 of them. And we have half of our XP bar filled up. Let's kill 1 more. And look at that, our level went up to 2. Now, that's the only thing that happened. Usually, a lot more dramatic effects happen, and we'll make all those happen. But at least we know that our level is updating in the HUD, and that looks great. Now, usually we see a little something more than just a value, like a number there. There's usually something else in the overlay, like the picture, like a portrait of our character, something like that. So before wrapping up the video, I'd like to create another widget, not functional, doesn't listen for any broadcasts, just something that's a nice framed picture of Aura, like a screenshot. Now, if we click on all and filter by texture, we'll see right up here at the top, we have Aura render. I can double click on it, and here we have a nice portrait of Aura. I'd like to use this and perhaps even frame it, maybe even get a globe with a ring and a glass with her picture behind it. I think that would look really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and create another widget using Aura Render. So I can remove that texture filter and go to Blueprints UI, and I'm just going to go into Progress Bar and get my globe progress bar and steal that. I'm going to duplicate it and call this one WBP picture frame. That's all it's going to be, is a picture frame. It's actually not going to be a progress bar. So I can drag it out of the progress bar, and I'll just put it straight into overlay, the overlay folder, move here. And here in overlay, I'll just drag it into subwidget and move there. So we can start gutting out what we don't need here. I'm going to go into the graph, and first of all, we don't need globe % set. I'm going to delete that. We don't need event tick. We don't need to interpolate anything. We don't need to update the ghost globe brush. We'll keep the glass padding. We'll keep the glass brush. We don't need to update the globe padding or the globe brush. We'll keep the background brush and the box size. Everything else is unnecessary. So over here in the functions, we'll see what we'll keep. Update box size. Now background brush, that's something we're using, right? That's our image background. So we'll keep that. We don't need to update globe brush or globe padding. We'll keep glass brush and glass padding. We don't need to set progress bar %. We don't need to update the ghost globe brush or set the ghost progress bar %. Now we see that it's in use. Let's see where it is in use. If we hit compile, we can click on this link here. We see that it's in interp ghost globe. We can just remove that function too. And now we've gutted out everything we don't need. We can come back to the designer, and I typically save all before deleting these. Sometimes they can cause a crash, but I'm going to delete those progress bars, and we have this. Now we want a picture, so I'm going to drag in an image right here, and it can go beneath the glass. And this image I'm going to call image_picture. I'm going to set it to fill, and I'm going to browse to Aura Render and set that for the picture. And that looks pretty nice. It's too bad the background on this picture isn't transparent, because then we could use a flowing material for that too, and that would look kind of cool. But we have this nice picture. Now we can use this in our overlay. I'd like to just save this and go into our WBP overlay and find our picture, WBP picture frame. Now, I'd like to align both of these. So I'm going to select this one. It's anchored to the top left, and so is this. So I'm going to take this one and take its position X, copy it, take my picture, paste its position X in, and unfortunately that means that their left sides are aligned, of course. So what I'm actually going to do is set my picture frame almost all the way to the left. We'll make it 10, and my size X is 250. Half of that is 125. Add 10 to that, we have 135. That's where I want this one to be, minus half of its size. So if I take position X and put it to 135, and then take its size X, which is 100, and subtract 50 from that, 135 minus 50, that's 85. So if I put in 85, now I know they're aligned. Now I can take this one, my picture frame, and bring it up to the corner, and take my value globe and bring it down. And actually I'm going to put the picture frame behind it so that I can take my value globe and put it in front like this. That might look pretty nice. Let's see how it looks in the viewport. Yeah, I like that. I think that looks nice. We could put it up more and to the right a little bit, but we can move them together now. So selecting them both, I can just click and drag. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to save all. Yeah, that looks great, actually. I'm very happy with that. We may have it brought in a little, but let's see how it looks full screened. F11 will full screen it. I actually like that. I think it looks great. We can open the menu. The menu covers it almost completely. I think it looks great. And if we level up, we can see it go up to 2. Let's kill a couple of these things before I die. There, and it goes up to level 2, and it looks great. I like it. I like it a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. We may just tweak one last little thing. My value globe can have probably a bigger text size. I might go up to 40, perhaps even, maybe 46. And we can even have more of a yellowish color. But this is all just tweaking at this point. I think things are looking quite nice. I'm very happy with that. I might change the outline size to 2. All right, excellent job. And with that, we'll wrap this up, and I'll see you in the next video.